Hello, I'm Chris James, President and CEO of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development. Thank you for joining us today for our next Native Edge Institute, which is called Strengthening the Economic Diversification of Small Businesses. We really want to thank you for joining us. Thank you to our primary supporters for this initiative, the Wells Fargo Foundation. We really could not do events like this without their help and without help of other supporters like them. We have a full-packed agenda. You'll be hearing from speakers from the Nevada Department of Business. You'll be hearing from Square, our partners of Square, Government Contract Pros, the Sequoia Fund, the National Veterans Business Council, and of course, our Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce. And we really thank you for Reno for hosting this great event today. You'll see more about some of the activity that the community has done and even some of our tribes here in this area. We really appreciate doing this event, focusing not only nationally, but of course, focusing on our businesses here in the state of Nevada, where we want to be a resource to you. We want to continue to help grow your business and get to the next level. And that's really what diversification, or this webinar, is about, specifically on business diversification. We know, just like all of us, the effects that this national pandemic has had on our businesses. Now we're into over 8 months of having to think through how we as business owners change the way we do business, how we look at other maybe funding sources, even just to survive, or maybe we've closed our business and we have to rethink how we get to how we reopen our business, how we accommodate for this pandemic. And the speakers that you will hear will really give you that information on thinking about creating that long-term strategy for your business and how to hopefully get a little bit out of survival mode, like a lot of our business has been across the country, and into a mode where we have business success and continue business success. It doesn't matter what size of business you are. I know that the information that you'll get from our Native Edge Institute will be valuable. And especially thinking about if those of you, especially any of you that are doing or wanting to get into the government contract arena, if you're thinking about looking at opportunities, maybe they're in hub zone opportunities, maybe there's other opportunities with some of the other government focused contracting, you can get some information later on today through Government Contract Pros. All of this will be recorded information, so feel free to reach out to us and we'll send you the information and link so that you can rewatch it. We'll also send you all the information that is available. There's also a chat feature, so you can ask questions for us on chat. We hope you really take a look at all the other products that National Center offers to our clients. We have over 1,000 clients nationwide, and we hope those of you that are watching today signs up to be our clients. We also are continuing to plan our Reservation Economic Summit, and there's more information at www.ncaied.org. We would love for you to participate, whether it's virtual or looking, we hope in the future, of in-person meetings again. We really look forward to working with your business, working with your tribal community, and really helping our businesses grow and our communities thrive. So with that, I really thank you all for your support of the National Center. Thank you for the support of the Native Edge Institute, and we thank you all for being with us. And lastly, I hope everyone has a happy holidays as we go into 2021 soon. Again, have a wonderful day, and we will now start the Native Edge Institute.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate being here. I am Derek Watchman, the chairman of the board for the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development, the National Center as we call it. On behalf of the board of directors, we thank you for joining us again for this Native Edge Institute here in Reno. We think it's important for everyone to participate and glean from it as much information. We worked pretty hard over the last year to provide speakers, and today is obviously great. We think that the 8A platform and getting involved and growing your business with the federal government is probably a good way to go. We also really want to emphasize that the National Center is here to help you in any regard that we have possible. We have our folks here available through the NEI platform. We have our PTAP program, and then of course we have all of our staff, our wonderful staff around the country who work for the National Center. And then of course my colleagues, myself on the board. Many of us have been in business for many years. We're associated with many national organizations. So use us as a platform. Use us as a sounding board. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll do the best we can, to provide you and give you the information that's important. As a chairman of the board, I think it's very important for the National Center to really focus on improving and increasing Indian economic development, entrepreneurship, and business growth in Indian country, on and off reservations. I come from a little town called Navajo, New Mexico. Unfortunately, that little town has not grown in the past, generations that I've been a part of it. And so what I'd like to see with the work that we do with the National Center through our Native Edge Institute is to provide the tools, the information, and the contacts for you all to either grow, either to create a new business, or to expand. There's many opportunities for us as Native Americans. As we close the year this year, it's been tough for all of us. I know that the National Center has been impacted by COVID-19. I'm sure many of you out there have been impacted. Our prayers and our thoughts to you and your family. We hope that you continue to be safe. And as we move into our 2021 year, we obviously hope for the best. We hope that we continue to provide services to you. We hope that you all get through the COVID-19, and we hope that we can help move into recovery. That's going to be the next big objective for all of us. So on behalf of the National Center, the board of directors, my staff here at the National Center, I say welcome, thank you, enjoy the information today, and aheha. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first day of our Native Edge event. Today's focus will be on government contracting and procurement, as well as entrepreneurship. We will be joined by John Shiraka of Government Contract Pros and Russ Siegel of the Sequoia Fund. Up first, we have John Shiraka joining us. John Shiraka is co-founder and managing director of Government Contract Pros. John assists small business and government contracting in all cycles of their business life cycle. Thanks for joining us, John. What insights can you give us into government contracting?
All right. Thank you, Ali, for that kind introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm happy to be here. Thank you to the National Center for having me. What I wanted to talk today about is a little bit of an overview on the government contracting and the small business set-aside programs. Once we get an understanding of the programs, how they operate, what the requirements are, I want to talk a little bit more of the sophisticated sort of approach to business development, mentor-protege, joint venturing. And then I want to go a little bit over recent changes and how that potentially is going to impact the federal government marketplace in particular, and small business in general, and small business contracting in particular. So when we talk about the federal marketplace, and the reasons why one would want to participate in the federal marketplace, I think it's important to understand that the federal government is the largest buyer of goods and services in the world, right? So especially what we've seen in the last several months, when we have reactions in the private sector, when we look at COVID and the tightening up of the private sector marketplace, and a lot of small businesses facing challenges in the private sector, it's beneficial to have, at least as part of your portfolio, the federal government as a buyer, as one of your clients, right? Because the federal government continues to operate, the federal government continues to spend, and it helps small businesses weather, challenges. And the federal government has the requirement to set aside 23% of everything that it buys for small business government contractors. So when we talk about the largest procurer of goods and services in the world, we're talking about roughly $450 to $550 billion a year. That's billion with a B, right? And when we talk about 23% of that going to small businesses, we're talking, anywhere from 90 to $100 billion annually going to small businesses through federal contracting. And the federal government is a great client, right? They aren't going to go out of business. They pay their bills. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but they always pay their bills. And it's an excellent way of diversifying your portfolio. And so in addition to the small business set-aside program, or the 23%, what we also have is what the federal government generally refers to as the 5533, right? So when we talk about 5533, those are different socioeconomic categories for set-asides, in addition to the 23%, right? So there's 5% for small and disadvantaged businesses, or 8A companies. There's 5% of a goal for women-owned small businesses. There's a 3% goal for service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, and there's 3% for hub zone, or historically underutilized business zone companies, or firms that are located in a hub zone. And I'll talk a little bit about each of those categories as we go along, and explain what the requirements are for each of those categories, and what the advantages or the challenges are in certifying for each of those categories. I think it's really important to understand in a broad concept, when one does work or decides to do work with the federal government, you generally would, or you have to register under SAM, or I'm going to jump here real quick, the basic systems, the System for Award Management. So when you go to register for the System for Award Management, it asks you a number of questions, and then it determines, okay, are you small for your primary industry? And if you are small, you basically self-represent as a small company. Now, if you are able to qualify for some of the other socio categories like 8A, woman-owned, service-disabled, hub zone, there are additional requirements for classifying your firm as such. For hub zone, historically, for hub zone, which has a 3% goal, and for 8A, which has a 5% goal, historically, those have been full front-end certification programs. So what does that mean? That means that there's a process for applying to the Small Business Administration for those programs. It means that you have to demonstrate that you meet the requirements, and you have to provide upfront the documentation to be certified into those programs. The SBA will look at your documentation and will come up with a determination of yes, you qualify, or no, you don't. Those historically have been the full front-end certification programs. Women-owned small business program had historically been a quote-unquote self-representation programs. In other words, very similar to how in SAM you answer some questions. You would also, and you do also, answer questions with respect to ownership. And if your entity is woman-owned, then you would self-represent as a woman-owned small business, and similarly as a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. Since October of this year, actually earlier in the year, the rules were changed around the Women-Owned Small Business Program. And since October of this year, the Women-Owned Small Business Program is also now a full front-end certification program. Again, an application process at certify.sba.gov in order to upload and the proper documentation and demonstrate that your firm not only is small, but woman-owned. As it stands today, the SDVOSB, or Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Program, is still a self-representation program. In other words, you self-represent in SAM. Once you've gone through that process, you can pursue SDVOSB set-aside contracts. Where the agency, SVA, would get involved is if there is a protest and someone, some interested vendor, maybe the person that ranked first or the firm that ranked second, files a protest. That's when the SBA would collect your information and then make the determination if indeed you are an SDVOSB company. So as it stands today, there's the three programs are full front-end certification, right? 8A, woman-owned, and HubZone. And then service disabled for all of the federal government is self-representation. The one exception to that is that if you're looking to do work with the VA, the Veterans Agency, you have to certify through the VA's own system. But that's only if you want to pursue veteran-owned small business set-asides or service-disabled veteran-owned small business set-asides at the VA. Otherwise, it's a self-representation program. So taking a step, I guess, towards what and how does one certify, and what are some of the important systems that you need to be familiar with, and where does one, conduct some research to determine what agencies you should be looking at, et cetera. I want to talk a little bit about the basics of the various systems, right? We just mentioned the system for acquisition management or award management, SAM. So any firm that wants to do work with the federal government is required to register in SAM. SAM will ask you a bunch of questions about your Dun & Bradstreet registration. It'll ask you about number of employees, revenue, et cetera, and ownership. And will determine if you're small. If you are indeed small, based on your answers, it will open an additional file, which is important to understand because a lot of folks don't realize, even firms that have been in business for a number of years, believe that SAM is the only registration system. And they don't realize that when you're determined to be a small business, there's an additional file that's opened up for your firm. And that file is housed in what's called Dynamic Small Business Search, or DSBS, Dynamic Small Business Search. And that's important for a number of reasons. Number one, you can upload corporate qualifications, your profile, et cetera, as a small business into DSBS. And you do have to go through SAM to get to those pages and update and upload that information. But it's important to do so because, and I'll talk about this next with respect to set-asides and how they occur, it's important to do that because contracting officers, so buying agencies, when they're looking for small businesses, they will look at the Dynamic Small Business Search, or DSBS database, to identify potential small businesses. Now, they may do market research in other ways, right? They could do Google, they could have industry days, matchmaking, et cetera. But one of the tools that they use is DSBS. So it's important for small businesses to understand that and then to regularly update their profile in DSBS. And the one thing we always tell our clients is that DSBS is like an Internet 2.0 database, and it's not the most user-friendly database. And it does a quirky thing where when a contracting officer does a search, it brings up the files that have most recently been updated. So we have clients that go in regularly, monthly, or at least quarterly to update their profile. So that's DSBS. The other thing that you should be familiar with used to be called FBO, or Fed Biz Ops. It's now called beta.sam.gov, but it has every opportunity over $25,000 that's going to be let for procurement is listed in beta.sam.gov. So it's a good place to do some research to identify, okay, what are agencies buying Are they buying what I'm selling? What's the size of the contracts? And how do I pursue that opportunity? Is it a proposal? Is it an RFQ, request for quotation? Is it a request for proposal? It's a good place to understand what and how the federal government buys. And obviously every requirement over $25,000 is there. So if the government is purchasing something on a standalone contract, it will be listed in beta.sam.gov, and that's where you would look and then apply to the request for proposal. What I always tell clients though is that if you're just waiting for the opportunity to come up on FBO, or now it's called beta.sam.gov, a lot of times that's late, because a lot of times the incumbent has already sort of put their team together. A lot of times your competition knows that the bid's coming up for rebid and is teaming up and putting together their qualifications, et cetera. So when you see the listing on beta.sam and just then begin preparing the proposal, which is usually due in 45 days, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, a lot of times that's too late. So how do we identify opportunities and build a pipeline where we can really get prepared for projects before they come out on beta.sam.gov? The Federal Procurement Data System, or FPDS, is an important system to be aware of, and it's really an important system to understand and sort of capture the data in. Now, I'll be totally honest, FPDS, Federal Procurement Data System, is not the most user-friendly data system in the world, right? It's if DSPS is a Internet 2.0, FPDS sometimes is like an Internet 1.0, right? It's not user-friendly. And there is a sister data system that's called USA Spending that's easier to use, but it's not the official data system for procurement, but it is easier to use. Everything that has ever been purchased over $25,000 is an FPDS. So you can go into Federal Procurement Data System, you can do a search for, I always say, okay, I'm selling widgets. Who's buying widgets? You can identify, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Wow, they buy $1 billion worth of widgets every year. Maybe that should be on my list with respect to potential target customers, right? So FPDS, because the federal government is such a huge entity with different buying activities and different components in the Department of Defense and Homeland Security and all the various agencies, for a small business, you don't have a lot of resources to spin your wheels and sort of do the shotgun approach, right? It's really, really important to be able to directly focus your limited resources on your top buying activities. So the Federal Procurement Data System allows you to go in there and say, okay, who's buying widgets? Here are the top 5 widget buyers across the federal government, right? But even more so, or even more than that, it can tell you, okay, was that one contract for $1 billion, or was it, 1,000 contracts for, the math is hard, but $10 million or $1 million, right? So that's more friendly to a small business. And then it also can tell you, okay, are they setting this aside for small businesses? Are they setting it aside for 8A companies? And so you can figure out, based on this analysis, who your top 5 buying activities should be. And based on that analysis, what we tell our clients is, okay, figure out who your top 5 buying activities are, right? Are they setting aside for small business? Are you an 8A? Are they 8A friendly? Are they women-owned small business friendly? And then, the data in FPDS is really neat because it'll tell you who the incumbent is. So do I have an opportunity to team up with the incumbent? Or is the incumbent graduating 8A and can't bid on this anymore? And I'm a new 8A, I can bid on it. That's a leg up. Or who the contracting officer is, or who the program office is. These are all important factors in strategizing and building your pipeline. and FPDS is a big piece of that. The other thing that, with respect to market research that I always point to is, okay, so now you've identified requirements that are about to expire. You've identified a contracting officer potentially and a program office, right? Because program office has the money, contracting office exercises the procurement and executes the procurement on behalf of the program office. But the last sort of leg to the stool is who's the small business office. So every agency and every buying activity has a small business person or official that's responsible for set-asides. So you also want to identify who the small business office is and see if they're having events, they're having matchmaking. Is there an opportunity to introduce your firm to the small business office? At the end of the day, the small business office, in a lot of agencies, it's called the Office of Small Business Programs, OSBP. And in some agencies, it's called OSDBU. Federal government loves their acronyms, Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. But it's important to understand who that person or office is and what kind of events they have, matchmaking, industry days, because that office is responsible for that agency to meet its set-aside goals. So they're constantly looking for qualified small businesses to set requirements aside. So it's really important to learn who that small business office is, get to know them, have them to know you, and interact and engage with them. The last sort of basic system that is important to know it's out there, it's called Subnet. Subnet is an SBA database, and it lists prime contractors that are looking for subcontractors. So when we talked about the goals for the federal government, 23% and then 5533, well, all large prime contractors have subcontracting goals. So a lot of times, the way to enter the federal marketplace for a small business is through subcontracting. And so when the federal government has the 5533 goal, the prime contractors have the same goals, and they're looking for qualified small businesses. So Subnet lists firms that are actively looking for qualified small business subcontractors. Again, it's sometimes outdated, but it's worth checking. And again, it's important to engage with the agencies that you're interested in, because when the OSDBU office has industry days, their large prime contractors are usually at the industry days and conducting matchmaking and looking for qualified small businesses to subcontract with. So those are sort of the basics of the system. The one thing that I'd say before I move on is that if you ever get into a situation where you're registering for SAM, or you're researching FBO or beta.sam.gov or FPDS, and there's a website that wants to charge you, you're not at the right website, right? The federal government does not charge for any of these services or any of these data sets. Now, granted, there are some really good third-party vendors that take this information and make it very useful and are very expensive. And they're beneficial to some people and useful, right? But if you don't have to spend money to get the data that I just explained, and you don't have to spend money to register with SAM. Now, again, there are consultants that'll help you do that, but as soon as you begin your registration process in SAM, you're gonna get a million emails about, pay us $250 and we'll get you registered. You don't have to. You can do it on your own. It might take a while. It might be a learning experience, but you can do it on your own. Or I should say, the National Center has PTACs as well, Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. They can help you too with respect to registering on SAM and analyzing some of these databases. So now that we've talked about, the small business set-aside program, we've talked about some of the basic requirements. One of the things that is really critical to understand as small businesses is how does small business set-asides occur, right? So even when I speak to sophisticated small businesses, who've done this for years and years, right? Either as a firm or as a small business expert. Oftentimes, they don't understand what the mechanisms for enforcing set-asides are. And that's really important as a small business in the marketplace, because the small businesses can be the eyes and ears of making sure that set-asides are enforced. And there's basically two ways that I'll talk through. One is the simplified acquisition threshold, and below that threshold. And like I said, the government likes acronyms. And so it's called SAT, Simplified Acquisition Threshold. And the other is Rule of Two. And I'll talk a little bit about both of those. So Simplified Acquisition Threshold. By definition, everything below the SAT, $250,000 right now, is reserved for small businesses. So there is no opportunity where that requirement shouldn't be set aside for small businesses. So there is an analysis that when I used to run these programs with the federal government, we used to analyze SAT spend at every agency to see if they were hitting the 100% mark. And there's reasons why federal agencies won't hit 100%, right? Because if there's a license for, say, Microsoft or a Cisco tool or a meeting tool like Zoom, those companies may not be small, but you may need to go to the Microsoft because there's not a reseller to purchase that license. So there's reasons why agencies don't hit to 100%. But generally speaking, some agencies are really close. They're like 95, 94, 93. And then some agencies do a poor job and are constantly reminded about meeting that goal and are constantly reminded that those requirements by law should be set aside and reserved for small businesses. So the one thing that I'd say is if you're seeing requirements under the SAT not set aside as sort of the eyes and ears of small businesses, you should bring that to the attention of the Small Business Administration. And I'll talk a little bit about who enforces these things, right? So that's sort of SAT, or Simplified Acquisition Threshold, in a nutshell. The one thing that I should add is that within that threshold, and I always, sort of giggle at this because it's another acronym, we have SAP, SAP. So we have the Simplified Acquisition Procedures. So within the Simplified Acquisition Threshold, we also have the Simplified Acquisition Procedures, and it is a good place for new federal contractors to get sort of their feet wet because the procedures are simplified and it's easier to comply. Now, when we talk about over $250,000, what comes into play is the Rule of Two. And basically, the Rule of Two says that if there are two or more small businesses that can provide the product or service at a reasonable price, not the best price, at a reasonable price, then the requirement shall be set aside. And so in government speak, shall means it has to. So it's not a may, and that's really important. So it means it has to be set aside. If two or more small businesses can provide the product or service at a reasonable price, then it has to be set aside. It shall be set aside. And this is where it's important for a contracting officer to be able to do adequate market research, right? So if they go to DSBS and you haven't updated your profile and they can't find any good small businesses, they can say, well, look, I tried, no small businesses. Or if they issue a sources sought means they're looking for potential qualified small businesses and no one responds, then they can say, well, I tried, no small businesses, so I'm not setting this aside. Now, how is this enforced? Who enforces the Rule of Two? There are officials that work for the SBA. These guys used to be under my program office, that are called Procurement Center Representatives, or PCRs. There is a PCR for every buying activity across the United States. So within the Department of Defense, within Homeland Security, Commerce, GSA, NASA, there's a PCR that covers that buying activity. And their job is that if a requirement does not get set aside, so it's not small business set aside, the PCR has to sign off on that. And the PCR is going to look at the file and say, did you do your market research? Is there two or more small businesses? So that's why it's important to respond to sources sought it's important to update your dynamic small business search profile to help the PCR, right? Because the PCR also can say, I don't know, this file looks kind of thin. I'm going to go to DSPS myself, or I might even Google it. So if you're seeing requirements not get set aside where a source of sought came out, and you responded, and at least 2 or 3 of your competitors responded, then you should be identifying the PCR that covers that buying activity. And the SBA has a great website that identifies who covers what, and informing them, saying, hey, this requirement didn't get set aside. I'm almost certain there's 2 or more small businesses. And each PCR reports to an area director. And there's 5 areas around the country. So you could even engage the area director. Now, I should say that the PCRs are highly overworked. When I was running the programs, we had close to, I want to say 150 PCRs around the country, which was at that time woefully inadequate for the thousands and thousands of buying activities. I think we're down to about 55 PCRs around the country. And that's why I say small businesses are the eyes and ears for the SBA, right? If you're seeing things happen, it's important to inform the PCR and the area director. I think that's sort of the importance of set-asides, how they occur, how you can help in enforcement, and where the touch points are with respect to engaging the oversight of the set-aside programs. So we've talked about the federal marketplace in general. We've talked about the basics of the system. Now I want to talk a little bit about small business set-aside, right? Just small in general. And then I'll touch on the topics of 8A, HubZone, and then I want to talk a little bit about mentor protege and joint venture. And if we have time, about recent changes. So small business set aside, small businesses in general, you need to be small for your primary NAICS code, right? So NAICS code, North American Industry Classification System code. Every industry has a code. Services industry is based on revenue. Manufacturing is based on number of employees. When you answer the questions, you put your primary NAICS code in, it says, wow, you're small for your primary NAICS code. You can have multiple secondary NAICS codes, right? But the requirement when pursuing federal set-aside contracts is that you have to be small for the NAICS code assigned to that contract, okay? So you can be small in one industry and large in another, because some industries have a size standard of 14 million. Some industries have a size standard of 39.5 million. So you can literally be small in one industry and large in another. That's perfectly fine. But when you go pursue a particular contract, the NAICS code in that contract is going to determine if you can apply for that contract, or you can bid on that contract, right? So if the NAICS code is a $14 million NAICS code and you're at $20 million and that contract is set aside, you can't bid on that contract because you would be representing that you're small and you're not. The size is determined by your revenues for the last 5 years, right? The average revenues for the last 5 years. It used to be last 3 years. There was a lot of contention with respect to, I had one peak year and now I'm no longer small, but it was just one peak year and I had a really good year, but I should still be small. So there was a lot of focus from the Hill and the rules changed about 1.5 years ago. So now there's a 5-year look back period. It helps average that out further. Up until January 6th of 2022, it's your choice. Whichever one is more beneficial to you, you can use the 3-year look back or the 5-year look back, whichever one's more beneficial. But after January 6th, 2022, you have to use the 5-year look back. And again, the important thing is, are you small for the NAICS code assigned to that contract? Now, if you are pursuing the 8A program, you have to be small for your primary NAICS code. If you're pursuing the HubZone program, you have to be small for the primary NAICS code in order to get into the HubZone program. But when you are bidding on a small business set-aside requirement, you have to be small for the NAICS code assigned to that requirement. Usually the questions that come up in this section when we have the ability to do these live is, how can $39 million in revenues be small? Or how can 1,500 employee size standard be small? I always used to get that because the size standards was another program that I was responsible for. And the answer to that is, look, the 1,500 employee size standard is for shipbuilding, right? Those manufacturers a lot of times have 30, 40, 50,000 employees. So 1,500 employees is small. And 39.5 million is for construction, and construction has a lot of expenses, right, in building capacity. So 39.5 is small for construction. Some of the services industries will be down near the 16.5 or the 14 million, and those are mostly professional services industries. When we talk about small and how to determine that you're small and self-represent, it's revenue and employees based on what industries you're in. But one of the things that often comes up with respect to questions is, okay, number one, I self-represented, what happens next? And number two, are there special sort of ways that the federal government looks at size that may come back to quote unquote bite me or hurt me, right? And I think it's important to understand that what are normal practices in the private sector, like partnerships, joint ventures, common ownership, et cetera, those things can sometimes lead to what the government calls a finding of affiliation. And I always go over affiliation because it's important to understand it. I don't mean it in a way to scare any firms. But if you're new to federal contracting, affiliation can potentially be a problem. Now, the SBA isn't going to come and look at your documentation because small business representation is a self-representation program unless there's a protest, right? So you win, someone loses, they file a protest. Contracting officers can always file a protest. SBA reserves the right to always file a protest. So there's a protest, they ask for all the documentation in order to demonstrate that you are indeed small. And one of the things they look at is affiliation. So what's normal in private sector, let's say joint venturing or partnering with another firm a lot or having common ownership, those things, if you joint venture all the time, if you partner all the time, if you have common ownership or common management, if you have common facilities, those things can add up to a finding of affiliation. And affiliation in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, right? So, okay, you do a lot of joint ventures, or okay, you have common ownership or common management, so you're affiliated. What SBA will do, they won't say, wow, that's a bad thing, but what they'll do is they'll combine your revenues of the two firms to determine if you're still small. And that may have an impact with respect to being able to win that contract. If combined, you're no longer small, then you will be found other than small, and the contract can't be set aside for your firm. It would go to the next ranked firm. So that's why it's important to understand the concept of affiliation, not to be scared of it, but just to understand that some practices like partnerships, common ownership, common management, even over-reliance on a subcontractor, which is called ostensible subcontracting, those types of things. And what the SBA, and this is what always frustrated me about this program when I was responsible for it, is that the SBA says they will look at the totality of the circumstances. So it doesn't mean, you have two JVs, two joint ventures, common management, and common office space, therefore you're affiliated. There's no bright sort of red lines with respect to this is affiliation and this is not. What SBA says is that they'll look at the totality of the circumstances, look over all the documentation to determine if it rises to a finding of affiliation. So just be aware of that. So the 8A program. I want to talk about when you might want to look into getting into the 8A program, and then the overall sort of requirements for the program. The 8A program obviously is very beneficial and useful to the Native community, right? Individual firms can be owned by tribal communities, Native Hawaiian organizations, Alaskan Native corporations, but they can also be owned individually by people from Alaska, tribal residents, and Native Hawaiians. So there's different ways of owning 8A companies. But the 8A program in general is a business development program, right? So it's a 9-year business development program. And it's very important. A lot of times we hear, hey, you should get into the 8A program. It's really great if you want to get into federal contracting. But you should also be very careful because you only have 9 years to be in the program. So what we always tell our clients is be ready to be in the program, right? Don't get into the program if you already don't have some foothold in federal contracting, right? Because you're going to waste the first 2, 3, 4 years just learning federal contracting and developing those relationships before you can take advantage of what the 8A program has to offer. So it's really important to be ready for the program. And then it's a 9-year program. In the first several years, you have the ability to get sole source opportunities. And then in the last 3 years, they're the transitionary years, and you get weaned off of sole source opportunities. In the 8A program, the sole source authority is very unique. And so that's something that differentiates the 8A program. So you do have sole source and hub zone, women-owned, service disabled. But in those programs, the contracting officer has to write a justification that you are the only firm that can provide that product or service, right? So that's the only way. And that justification has to be approved by a higher contracting authority. So in those programs, the only way a sole source can get approved is if the contracting officer writes a justification for the sole source and demonstrates that you're the only company that can provide that product or service. In the 8A world, within the thresholds, and these have gone up maybe a little bit to 7.5, but it's $4 million for all other contracts and $7 million for manufacturing. Within those thresholds, the contracting officer can sole source an opportunity to any firm that he or she believes can provide that product or service effectively, right? Now, there'll be a government cost estimate and there'll be some price negotiations, but there isn't a need for a justification and approval within those thresholds, the $4 and $7 million threshold. So it's very unique and different than the other set-aside programs. In the 8A program, sole source authority is unique, and sole source contracting is a quick, easy way for contracting officers to engage small businesses. And that's why a lot of firms, that's why you hear, oh, it's really good to be in the 8A program because there's a lot of contracting opportunities. It is not just the 8A set-asides, which are competitive and restricted to 8A firms, but it is the unique 8A sole source authority, which allows the contracting officer to sole source an opportunity to an individual firm without competition and without justification and approval, as long as it's within those thresholds. So the requirements, one of the things that I'm going to talk about with respect to requirements is common across all of the programs, right? Ownership and control. So it's really important to understand that the individual that the designation is based on. So if you're an individually owned firm, that designation is based on either one individual or a group of owners. But they or her or him need to own the majority of the company, so 51% or more. And then you need to demonstrate control. So it's not enough just to say that I own 51% of the firm. You also have to show that you control day-to-day operations and make long-term decisions for the company. So if you have minority partners, and this is where a lot of firms get hung up when they apply for the programs. If you have minority partners that own less, you've met the ownership requirement, own less than 51%. You've met the ownership requirement, but you can't have unanimous consent provisions that restrict the owner's ability to run the day-to-day operations on his or her own and make long-term decisions. on his or her own. So that's really important, ownership and control. Now, when we talk about the 8A program, there's two additional requirements. One is you have to be socially disadvantaged, and the other is economically disadvantaged. So socially disadvantaged, there are some presumed classes, right? African American, Hispanic American, Native American, Asian Pacific Americans, subcontinent Asian Americans. So those are the presumed classes. If you fall into one of those categories, you can check off social disadvantage, right? However, if you don't fall into those categories, there's still ways to meet that requirement. If you don't fall into one of those presumed groups, you can, by providing evidence to the SBA of discrimination, demonstrate that you are socially disadvantaged. And what do I mean by that? So when I was running these programs, we would see, Caucasian white females in the 8A program. Why? Because they had applied and their industry was construction. And so in the construction world, in the construction marketplace, they could demonstrate not only that they had been discriminated against, because that's not enough. You have to be able to connect the dots, right? So not only have you been discriminated against, but that discrimination led to a lack of ability to grow your business, or led to a lack of ability to get hired, or be promoted, or get access to finance, or get access to education. So you have to demonstrate not only through the preponderance of evidence that there was discrimination, but it led to some negative effect, be it access to capital, access to getting jobs or promotions, access to education, access to growing your business, etc. So those are the ways to meet the social disadvantage requirement. The second requirement with the 8A program is economically disadvantaged. So economically disadvantaged, there are several requirements with respect to being economically disadvantaged. Number one is your personal net worth. Is your personal net worth below $250,000? And personal net worth excludes your primary residence, your retirement plans, and your retirement savings. It includes the value of your business. So there are deductions to come to the personal net worth, and it needs to be below $250,000. The other is your average income over the past 3 years $250,000 or less? And the last thing is your total assets. So we throw everything back in. Is that below $4 million? Those are the general requirements for being economically disadvantaged. And so once you get into the program, those numbers go up a little bit. So, your average income for the past 3 years can go up to $350,000. Your personal net worth can go up to $750,000, and your total assets can go up to $6 million. And these numbers change from time to time. I would encourage you to look at the SBA website as well. But those are the ballpark figures with respect to economic disadvantage criteria, right? So again, for the 8A program, very beneficial, sole source set aside requirements. You have to be economically disadvantaged, you have to be socially disadvantaged, and you have to be small, right, for your primary NAICS code, and you have to have ownership and control. Those are the general requirements for the 8A program. When we talk about the 5533, the federal government has met the 23% goal. The federal government has and continues to meet the 8A goal. They've met the women-owned small business goal several times now. They've met the service disabled goal several times now. The one program that they always have a difficult time in meeting is the HubZone goal, right? And so if you think you qualify as a HubZone company, and by the way, all Indian reservation land federally recognized is eligible HubZone land. So if you think you qualify as a HubZone company, I would encourage you to at least look at this, because the federal government is looking for qualified HubZone firms to engage with. The HubZone requirement, again, you have to be small for your primary NAICS code. Ownership and control, right? Important. The other requirements are your principal office has to be in a HubZone, and 35% of your staff has to live in a hub zone, right? So that doesn't mean in the same hub zone. First of all, what is a hub zone? A hub zone is a historically underutilized business zone. SBA, Small Business Administration, doesn't make up those maps or those zones. But if you go to the SBA Hub Zone website, you put in your address, the website's been updated. It's really interactive. It's a really cool database and interactive map. It'll tell you if the address is in a hub zone. A hub zone is based on data that Housing and Urban Development uses with respect to unemployment, economic growth, poverty, etc. And they crunch these numbers and they determine what areas are historically underutilized business zones. So number one requirement, principal office in a hub zone. Now, principal office is not your headquarters, right? The only thing that the principal office means is where the most number of your employees work. So there are ways to, and I don't want to say game it, but there are ways to manipulate number of employees working at different locations to meet the hub zone principal office requirement, right? So if you have, and the other thing you should be aware of is that you can exclude project worksite personnel. So if you have, a contract with Aberdeen Air Force Base and there's people on that base and you have people at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you can exclude those guys from this calculation. With the balance of your employees, you look to see where do most of our people work. And wherever that is, that's your principal office. So if you could move one person from this location to this location, and I've known firms that do that, and all of a sudden your principal office is in a hub zone, great, you should do that, right? So that's the only thing that a principal office is, where your most employees work. And then the other requirement, the 35% must live in a hub zone requirement, is not the same hub zone, right? So any hub zone, you may have people all over the country, but 35% of them need to live in a hub zone. That's really where a lot of firms sort of get, have a challenge, right? Because they win a contract, they bring on more people, all of a sudden they're below 35%. Can they still qualify? Are they still qualified? The maps change. So there was a lot of recent changes in the hub zone program to help stabilize the program. Number one, the maps aren't going to change, but for every 5 years, right? So they're set now until 2021, and then they're not going to change, but for every 5 years. That brings a lot of stability to the program. Number two, an employee is anyone that works 40 hours per month, not per week. So a lot of firms will hire interns from colleges and universities, and a lot of those places are in hub zones, and that helps them meet the hub zone requirement. The other part of sort of stabilizing the program is if an employee was a hub zone employee when you met the certification requirement, or you did your annual recertification, and they were an employee in a hub zone 6 months before and 6 months after, it doesn't matter if they move, right? So once a hub zone employee, always a hub zone employee, even if they move, if they meet that 6 months before and 6 months after requirement. And this was another hangup for a lot of hub zone firms. It was difficult for them to be able to comply because their employees would move and they'd lose their hub zone, 35% hub zone employee status. And so compliance was difficult. But now, once a hub zone employee within these restrictions, once a hub zone employee, always a hub zone employee, and they can move. And as long as they're on your payroll, that payroll doesn't get broken. And remember, 40 hours per month, that payroll doesn't get broken, they'll always be considered a hub zone employee. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the hub zone program if you think you qualify, because the federal government is really interested in identifying qualified hub zone firms in order to meet the hub zone requirement. The last thing that I'll say here is that for tribally owned entities, the one thing that you should be aware of is that instead of meeting the 35% employee requirement and the principal office requirement. When you as a tribally owned entity apply, you can say, I'm not going to meet those requirements. However, I promise when I get a HUBZone set-aside contract to employ the contract personnel from my community, at least to the tune of 35% of the contract staff, right? So just to be clear, as a tribally owned entity, you don't have to, you can qualify in a different way by promising that when you win a HUBZone contract, 35% of the contract personnel will come from the tribal land and or areas adjacent to the tribal land. So I think that's an important distinction for tribally owned firms and their ability to qualify for the program. Really quick, I think just for the woman-owned small business and service disabled program, again, the woman-owned small business program, similar requirements with respect to ownership and control, right? You have to demonstrate, number one, you're small. Number two, you have ownership of the firm, majority ownership. And number three, you have control, day-to-day operations and long-term planning. Similar to the SD, Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Program. You have to demonstrate those things. The difference between those two programs, again, just going back to what we talked about at the beginning, woman-owned is now a full front-end certification program like 8A and HUBZone. Service Disabled, unless you want to work with the VA, is self-representation. You self-represent, you don't have to upload anything. If there is a protest, SBA will ask you for your documentation. That's when you have to demonstrate that you meet the requirements of the program. So having said that, I do want to jump real quick into some of the programs that small businesses can use and leverage in order to be successful in the federal marketplace, right? So I'll talk a little bit about the All Small Mentor Protege program. I want to talk about the joint venture program as it relates to the All Small Mentor Protege program. And then I'll jump into some of the most recent changes, the rules that just became effective actually mid-November on the Mentor Protege program and the 8A program. And I'll try to be quick, but it's really important as firms sort of get their foothold in the federal marketplace to leverage the All Small Mentor Protege program and the joint venture program. And why do I say that? So the Mentor Protege program started out originally as only an 8A program. So new 8As, nascent 8A companies just getting certified, could team up with larger mentors, right? Mentors that could provide assistance to the 8A. And you really had to show and demonstrate that there were benefits flowing from mentor to protege, right? And there's 5 areas. Do you need financing? Is there a lack of financing? Is there a lack of past performance and project performance? Is there a lack of internal controls? Is there a lack of BD capacity? There are areas that you have to describe that where benefits flow. And it doesn't have to be all of them, right? So you have to demonstrate that in those areas, whichever is needed by the protege, benefits are flowing from mentor to protege. And like I said, originally it was an 8A program. And once you had this mentor protege agreement approved by the SBA, then you could create joint ventures. The benefit to the protege is they're getting assistance from the mentor. They're learning from the mentor. They're learning how to grow and implement contracts and be successful. And then this joint venture vehicle, which is really a legal entity that now can pursue contracts. And the benefit to the mentor is that as a partner in this joint venture entity, it can pursue set-aside contracts and implement up to 60% of the value of that contract, right? So benefit to protege, assistance from mentor. Benefit to mentor, they get to create a joint venture, go after set-aside contracts, because mentor potentially could have been large. Before this, they couldn't pursue set-aside contracts. Together, they can pursue set-aside contracts, and mentor can do up to 60% of that work. Generally speaking, on a set-aside contract, the small business, the prime, has to do at least 50% of the work. So in this instance, the mentor, who's not really the prime, can do up to 60% of the work. So that process or that program had been unique only to the 8A world. Back in 2010, the Small Business Jobs Act said expand that to all the socio categories, and eventually it was just expanded to all small businesses. So now it's called, the government loves acronyms, All Small Mentor Protege Program, ASMPP. So now it's called ASMPP, okay? Now, why is it important as a tool? As we see requirements becoming larger and more complex, we're seeing consolidation, we're seeing best-in-class vehicles like Oasis and Alliant. It's becoming much more difficult for individual companies, especially small businesses, not just to even win the contract, that's difficult, but then implementing that contract and being able to do 50% of the work is becoming even more difficult because of the consolidation and the complex requirements. So that's why the Hill thought, you know what, let's create the Mentor Protege program for all small businesses, allow them to team up and allow them to get the benefit of working with a mentor. So now you see a lot of joint ventures. And the one thing that you should be aware of as a small business is that up until yesterday, your competitor might have been another 8A, or it might have been another woman-owned small business. Today and tomorrow, that competitor is a joint venture. And that joint venture between mentor and protege brings all the status of the protege. So if the protege is 8A, hub zone, woman-owned, small business, that joint venture inherits that status. But it brings all the past performance and qualifications of both members. So now your competition is a JV, that's a woman-owned or an 8A, but it has all the quals of that 8A firm plus its mentor. And that mentor could be Lockheed, AECOM, KPMG, etc. So it's really important to understand how the dynamics are changing and also look to partner in a mentor-protege way. The couple of things I'd say, so that's the benefits, right? And the reasons why you should look at this program. A couple of things I'll say. Number one, make sure you select the right mentor. So everybody always says, yep, I want, Lockheed or Boeing. You only get 2 mentors in your entire lifetime as a small business. So you need to really, really do a gap analysis and say, what is it that I am missing as a small business that prohibits me from being effective in the full and open marketplace? And then figure out which mentor is going to bridge those gaps. So you only get 2 mentors in your entire lifetime. One of them, maybe if you're lucky, can be like a KPMG or a Deloitte or a Boeing. The other maybe should be someone who's been in your shoes before, a graduated 8A, right? A graduated woman-owned small business who was able to grow their company from tiny to large and be really successful because they've been in your shoes. So that's sort of what to look at. And the other thing that you should be aware of is that the mentor is also going to be selective because the mentor can have 3 proteges at any given point, right? You can only have 2 in your entire lifetime, but the mentor can have 3, but they can roll in and out of those 3. But that's still a limited number. When you look at Lockheed with all its subsidiaries and wholly owned subsidiaries and divisions, all of Lockheed at any given point can only have 3 proteges. So they are also selective. With respect to the joint venture creation, as I mentioned, the protege has to have ownership and control, very much like ownership and control when it comes to 8A, small business, woman-owned, et cetera. The protege has to have ownership, so 51%, and has to be able to demonstrate that they control. Number one. Number two, the joint venture inherits all the designations of the protege, so small business, 8A, hub zone, whatever the protege is, but it inherits also all the quals and corporate qualifications and past performance of both members. So that makes it very attractive in pursuing set-aside contracts. The JV, the joint venture entity, has a limitation on the number of contracts it can perform. So it used to be the 3-2 rule, and I'm not going to get into what the 3-2 rule was because it's no longer relevant, but there's now the 2-year rule. So once your joint venture receives its first contract, it can continue to receive contracts, or it can continue to bid on contracts for a period of 2 years. So the JV is a limited time vehicle. So for 2 years, you can continue to bid on contract. After 2 years from the date of your first contract, you have to stop bidding on contracts. That doesn't mean you can't accept contracts that have already been sent out or proposals that have already been sent out. But it does mean you can no longer bid on new contracts. What you should also be aware of is that once you sort of go through that JV1 and go through the 2-year process, you can create a JV2 and a JV3. And each of those will have that 2-year restriction. The other thing I just want to talk about broadly over the mentor-protege program is that the mentor-protege program is for 3 years, and then it can be renewed for an additional 3 years. So a total of 6 years total with your mentor. You get 2 of them. Some people double them up. Some people make them sequential. But you have to strategize to see what makes most sense for you. And obviously, one of the tools for development is the joint ventures. I would not go to the SBA and say, hey, I want a mentor-protege program because I just want to go set up joint ventures and implement set-aside contracts. That's not the purpose of the MPA program. One of the tools is a joint venture. The other is you have to demonstrate that there are benefits flowing from mentor to protege, and that you are developing over a period of time, because there's annual reporting requirements, and then at 3 years you need to get renewed. So you need to demonstrate the benefits really are flowing from mentor to protege. So having said that, I think that sort of covers the mentor-protege program and the importance of the mentor-protege program, how to leverage it, how to create joint ventures, and how to leverage those joint ventures with respect to federal contract set-asides. So I do want to talk real quick about some rules that were recently changed, because we talked about, the set-aside program, how to benefit from the set-aside program. We talked about 8A, HUBZone, women-owned service disabled. We talked about the mentor-protege program. There were some recent changes to the mentor-protege program, and then there were other government contracting quote-unquote amendments that affect the 8A program. And I want to highlight some of the good changes, right? Because when you strategize with respect to both the mentor-protege program and the 8A program, it's important to know how that strategy may change based on some of these recent changes. So with respect to the all-small mentor-protege program, as I talked earlier, it started in the 8A world, then the all-small mentor-protege program was created, and they really were operating side by side. And there was confusion with respect to, do I go through the 8A program? Do I go through the all-small mentor-protege program? What's the difference? And in effect, they were almost entirely the same. So this new rule, which became effective mid-November, merges the 2 programs. So now there's just the all-small mentor-protege program. Doesn't matter if you're 8A, HUBZone, service disabled, your designations flow to that ASMPP, and you apply through certify.sba.gov. So there's no more going through the district office with respect to application for the mentor-protege program. The other change that I think is beneficial is that there had been a number of instances where a protege, after getting into an MPA, wanted quote-unquote an annulment of the mentor-protege relationship. And there was no specific rules or processes or procedures with respect to getting that annulment. And as I said before, you only get 2 mentors. So it became very critical with respect to, wow, I'm not getting my benefits that I thought I was going to get. How do I annul this relationship? And SBA was looking at those on a case-by-case basis. They were making determinations with respect to how long has it been in effect. Was there any benefits that the protege received? Was there a JV created? There was all these questions and analysis. And so the new rule says that if you come to us within a period of 18 months and you haven't created a joint venture and you haven't received benefits, we can terminate that relationship. and it won't count against your two mentors. Now, they also say that you can't treat this as a testing program and just keep rolling in and out of mentor-protege programs or relationships every 18 months, because at some point they'll put a stop to it. But you do have the benefit of terminating within 18 months if the relationship is not turning out the way it was intended. The other important thing to point out with respect to the changes is the proteges are allowed to replace their mentor. So if instead of terminating and creating a new mentor-protege relationship, the alternative is, hey, this particular mentor isn't working out, but we have another ideal mentor. We just want to replace our mentor and not mess anything else up. That's also, that has also been codified in regulation, and there's a process for that. And then the last thing, I guess, that I would point out with respect to some of the changes in the mentor-protege program is that there had been some strict rules around, it's got to be in your primary NAICS code where you get the assistance. The mentor has to have experience in that primary NAICS code. And there was a lot of back and forth oftentimes if you want to get assistance in your secondary NAICS code. So there's loosening up of that restriction where if you want to work with a mentor in a secondary NAICS code and they have experience in that secondary NAICS code, SBA isn't going to be as critical as they used to be in approving those mentor-protege agreements. And I'm sorry, one last thing I want to add in here is that the SBA, always required annual reports, but they have additional emphasis on making sure that those reports are submitted and the mentor is evaluated. And the last thing is that the new rules allow the protege to get or to request SBA intervention when a mentor-protege relationship is not going well. So that was also a vague area with respect to, wow, this isn't going well. Number one, how do I terminate it? Can I terminate it? Is it going to count against my two mentors? And number two, can the SBA help? So those are the things that are clarified. And yes, SBA, although there's always a question of resources and how much resources the SBA really has to engage, but the rules allow the SBA to engage on behalf and intervene on behalf of the protege. Now, there was also some changes to the joint venture rules. So we talked about the mentor-protege program and how creating a joint venture under that mentor-protege program can be beneficial for pursuing set-aside contracts. Previous to this change, if you wanted to pursue an 8A requirement, that joint venture agreement had to be approved by the SBA district office, right? So you create your MPA. Under that MPA, you create a joint venture. That joint venture, if you were going to pursue an 8A set-aside contract, had to go to the district office for approval. Now, the change is that the only time the SBA district office wants to see that joint venture is on an 8A sole source. So if you're going after a small business set-aside, if you're going after a hub zone set-aside, service disabled, woman-owned, or just JV competitive, 8A competitive, it doesn't have to go to the district office. If you're going after an 8A sole source requirement, it still has to go to the district office and it still has to get approved. The one caveat I'll put in here, and this is really important and we tell all of our clients, it's really, really important, even though you don't have to get approved from the SBA, approval from the SBA district office, it's important to follow the rules and create that joint venture in a way where the protege owns and controls, because you're subject to protest. So even though it didn't have to get approved on the front end, you can get protested. That joint venture is going to end up at the SBA. The size office is going to review that joint venture. And if there is undue influence by the mentor, in other words, if you didn't follow the rules in establishing your joint venture agreement, you could end up losing that contract. So you spent a lot of time creating a mentor-protege, a joint venture, creating a pipeline, winning a contract, and if you didn't do your joint venture correctly, you didn't have to get it approved by the district office, you can still lose the contract because there was a protest and you didn't follow the rules. That's just a caveat. Be aware, follow the rules, make sure the JV is created correctly, even if it doesn't have to be approved in advance by the SBA. The other thing with respect to the joint ventures that I think is important to understand is that the rules specify that the joint venture has to be unpopulated. There were always questions with respect to administrative personnel or securities personnel working at the JV level, because in order to get facilities securities clearances, a lot of agencies required the JV to hold that clearance. And if you don't have personnel employed by the joint venture, they wouldn't give you the clearance. So SBA recognizes that yes, JVs, joint ventures, should be unpopulated, but they also recognize that for limited circumstances, they will have to be populated, either for administrative personnel or for securities clearance purposes. We talked about the 3-2 rule changing to the 2-year rule, so I'm not going to go over that. I do want to talk about real quick about some changes in the 8A program, and this is important because it affects a couple areas in the 8A program. One is further defining and clarifying what a follow-on contract is, right? So in the 8A world, a follow-on contract is important for a number of reasons. One is we say that once 8A, always an 8A. So agencies used to play around with that and say, oh, no. This is not a follow-on contract. This is an entirely new requirement. And SBA really didn't have a metric to say, you're right, that's a new requirement, or no, that's the follow-on requirement. You can't take it out of the 8A program. So the new requirement or the new clarifications say or analyze 3 things. One is, was there a change significantly in the scope of work? Was the magnitude of the contract increased or decreased by at least 25%? And did the end user change? Those are sort of, again, they're still a little bit gray, but they bring more clarity with respect to what a follow-on is. And again, once an 8A contract, always an 8A contract. If it's a follow-on, it has to stay in the 8A program unless the AA, Associate Administrator of the 8A program, releases it. The other reason why it's important is that in the tribally owned 8A world, where tribes can own multiple 8A subsidiaries, there is a restriction on follow-on sole source contracts going to sister companies. In other words, the SBA doesn't want a tribal organization to be able to capture a sole source requirement and pass it along from company to sister company to sister company. So follow-on work was not allowed to be sole source to a sister company. Again, the question was, what is the follow-on work? Now, because there's clarity, we can more clearly determine what follow-on work is. So that's, I think, an important 8A change. One of the other things that is important to understand with respect to the new rules is change of ownership. So previous to now, with respect to changes of ownership in the 8A program, if the change of ownership was with an owner of less than 10%, right? So not the designated individual, minority owner. If it was less than 10% change of ownership, you didn't have the requirement to get SBA approval prior to that change of ownership. That threshold has been increased to 20%. So if the change of ownership is below the threshold of 20%, you don't need prior approval of the SBA for change of ownership. You do need to inform the SBA with respect to that change of ownership. The other important factor with change of ownership is that in the tribal context, oftentimes there are adjustments in the organizational structure of how the tribal entities are held, right? Are they being held by the Economic Development Authority? Are they being held by a holding company? Are they being held directly by the tribe? And can we shift that ownership around under that tribal umbrella? Previous to this, that ownership change had to be approved. What SBA has said is, as long as the ultimate owner is still the tribe, we don't need to approve in advance. We just need to be notified. And then the last thing I'd say on the change of ownership is that if the disadvantaged owner is only getting more shares and ownership, and if the disadvantaged owner doesn't lose any control, again, no need for prior approval, just SBA notification. Two more things I really want to just touch base on. For those applying to the 8A program, it used to be that you had a reconsideration process if you were denied. That has been eliminated. So the reconsideration process is eliminated. However, it used to be that you had to wait a year from denial to apply again. That has been brought in line with the HubZone program. So this means that if you're denied, you can apply again in 90 days. But you can't just keep going 90 days and submitting the same application, because if you get denied 3 times in 18 months, then they're going to make you wait a year anyways. So the plus part is you don't have to wait a year after being declined. You only have to wait 90 days, which is like the HubZone program. Minus side, reconsideration is gone. And minus side, if you get declined 3 times in 18 months, you're going to have to wait a year. Last thing I'll mention with respect to the 8A program is that, and this is really important for new entrants, right? So when you first get into the 8A program, we say be ready, right? Be ready, hit the ground running, have your network, have your contracting offices aware that you're applying to the 8A program so you can hit the ground running and make full benefit of those 9 years. There was always a little bit of a hitch in that, because what the SBA required you to do before you could be awarded any benefits, any contracts, get any benefits from the 8A program, was for you to create a business plan and have that business plan approved by the SBA. Now, if you were at a not so busy district office, that usually wasn't that difficult, right? Because you could get in to see your business opportunity specialist. There was more direct engagement. You'd get your orientation meeting right off the bat. You could probably get your business plan in relatively quickly. For really busy district offices where they have orientation every quarter, once a quarter, and then you don't have direct relationship with your business opportunity specialist, you could have been spending like a month, 3 months, 4 months in just getting your business plan approved. And so you wouldn't have been able to get a contract or a sole source opportunity until that business plan was submitted and approved. The new rule says that you can begin receiving benefits as soon as you get into the 8A program. However, you have to submit your business plan within 60 days. So no longer do you have to wait to submit and get that approval. You do have to submit it in 60 days though, but you can begin benefiting from the program and receiving contracts set aside, sole source, as soon as you get into the program. So I think that's a big plus as well. That's where I'll stop. There's a couple of other minor changes to the 8A program as well, but I think those are sort of the important ones that I wanted to talk about today. So again, thank you for the National Center for having me, for including GCP in these events. We're delighted to be partners with you guys and have gone all over the country with you. And thank you, Ali, for hosting and moderating this event today.
Now we have Mr. Russ Siegel, Executive Director of the Sequoia Fund. Mr. Siegel has been with the Sequoia Fund since 2009. He oversees all operations of the Sequoia Fund and manages the Real Entrepreneurship Program. So, Mr. Siegel, why don't you tell us about your organization and how you are supporting entrepreneurship?
Well, thank you for this opportunity to present at this Native Edge Institute. We're always happy to participate with the National Center and the good work you're doing. My name is Russ Siegel. I'm the Executive Director of the Sequoia Fund. We're going to get a little bit more into what we do overall later. But for this first part, I just want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do. We're going to cover some history, goals, and outcomes of a program that we call Real Entrepreneurship. It's one of the major programs that we have here at the Sequoia Fund. And I'm going to explain a little bit about the experiential learning cycle approach that this entrepreneurship education program takes. I'm going to give you a little overview of our overall organization and how REAL fits in with what we do. Give you a little sneak peek of some things that are coming up for this exciting program, and I'm going to walk you through a sample activity. A lot of times people want to know, well, what does REAL look like? How can I use it? What if I've never taught before? What if I'm not an entrepreneur or a business person? What if I don't know anything about accounting or marketing? Well, REAL was designed for you in mind. REAL started back in 1985. A couple of educators got together in North Carolina and Georgia, Jonathan Scher and Paul Delargy, and they wanted to create a way to put entrepreneurship education into high schools. They realized that by the time our students graduated and either went on to college or got out into the working world, they were looking for jobs, and they were taking their higher education in a direction that was designed to help them go get a job, but not necessarily create a job. And they wanted to create something that would create a mindset in students of, how do I go out and make jobs, not just go get a job? And so it started in schools in the mid-1980s with something called school-based enterprises. And school-based enterprises are those ventures that classes or programs within a school will enter into in order to make money. It might be a school store. It might be some other fundraising activity. It might even be selling tickets to the spring musical for the drama department. So whatever it is that the school can work on together to raise funds, whether it's academic or athletics, they wanted to help schools create this venture with an eye toward learning how to be entrepreneurial, how to recognize opportunities. In about 1990, REAL actually trickled up into the community college and adult markets. Today, one of our biggest customers is the community college segment. And in 1996, it started to filter down into lower grades, and now we offer a K through 8 curriculum. It's a little bit pared down, deals a lot with civics. How does local government work? How does your government work? How do people make decisions where you live that affect your life? And how do businesses run in your neighborhood? Those kinds of things. In about the mid-90s, a version of Spanish REAL was designed. We also offer something called rapid response modules. These came about in the recession of the late 90s, right about the time, 99, 2000, when the tech bubble burst. How can we help businesses in a moment of crisis? And we rolled out these rapid response modules in a way that could address small business needs in an immediate way. And right about 1999, we also started to offer youth camps. These began as day camps for high schoolers. It morphed into overnight, week-long, even 2-week camps being held at university campuses for high school students. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that evolved a little bit later. So let's talk about REAL itself and what are the goals of REAL. REAL helps students identify and develop entrepreneurial talent. I believe that everybody has a little bit of entrepreneurial talent within them. It may not ever be brought out. Maybe nobody else in the family has ever started a business. Maybe I've never been taught how to look for opportunities, identify opportunities. And so I need that talent brought out in me. I need to be able to identify that. It helps increase self-awareness and understanding. When we understand our communication skills, sometimes we call these soft skills, leadership, communication, management skills, human relation skills. I believe they're necessary and essential skills. But REAL also helps people learn how to work together as a team, plan together as a team, and get things done as a group. It develops critical thinking and life skills. A lot of what REAL covers is based in essential financial understanding. how money acts and how money works and how we can make money work for us. It helps people learn about and identify opportunities within the local community. Again, sometimes when we're not really taught how to identify opportunities, a lot of opportunities just pass us by. It helps develop business knowledge and skills. What we've also found out is that if people take this course and they decide not to start a small business, that's okay. That's a positive outcome because it does help them become better employees and better citizens. It helps them understand the world around them better and to be able to function in it better, to be able to negotiate better, to be able to get what they need by being able to provide other people with what they need. It helps them experience a comprehensive planning process. There are many, in fact, activities within the REAL curriculum that are designed to help students learn how to plan, whether it's a full-blown business plan or a marketing plan or a financial plan, whatever level of planning they need. This really helps people take a step back and say, what has to happen before we get to the end destination. It helps them produce a business plan. In fact, in the academic setting, what we want students to do is to be able to create a business plan, whether it's at the end of the semester. When we put adults through this as a prerequisite to getting a loan through Sequoia Fund, they have to come out of that with a business plan. And we have resources in the community that can help them evaluate that business plan and hone it and make it as sharp as possible. Ultimately, to create and or expand viable enterprises. We stopped a long time ago looking at hard numbers because the numbers just got so big. As you see on the McDonald's signs now, they used to say 7 billion served or 11 billion served, 14 billion served. Now they just say billions and billions served because at some point you can't keep up with the numbers anymore. But in real numbers, we are in 44 states. We are in 12 countries. We have thousands of facilitators, and those facilitators teach anywhere from 12 to 14,000 students per year that we've been able to track. And it's created over the last 30 years or so, tens of thousands of small businesses. Now, there are a lot of programs out there to help people learn how to start businesses. But why does REAL work? Why REAL? Well, entrepreneurship education was not even a thing until Jonathan Scher and Paul DeLargy jumped into the mix and started to create this program. Nobody had done it before. And the way they did it was innovative. And it's still innovative today as we continue to develop the program. REAL was an entrepreneurship education pioneer that continues to do new things, to create new opportunities for students, for communities, and it's built on the experiential learning cycle. The experiential learning cycle approach is different from any other approach out there. Now, what used to happen and what would normally happen, and happens in a lot of cultures, is that the teacher is what we would call the sage on the stage. That's the person who stands in front of the class or in front of the group and dispenses knowledge. And you as a student are just expected to soak it up. You're just expected to take in as much as you can, write it down, and spit it back out on a test. And the experiential learning cycle creates a different dynamic. We actually don't call our instructors instructors. The people who teach REAL, we call facilitators because they are more about facilitating learning than teaching the content. Every activity within the REAL program is built on the experiential learning cycle, and every activity starts with an experience. I'm going to walk you through one of these a little bit later, but let's talk about this for a second. The experience is getting students to do something. This experiential learning cycle reaches students no matter what their preferred learning style is. Some of us are tactile learners. We have to get our hands dirty. We have to get in the mix and we have to do things to actually learn. Some of us are auditory learners. We can listen to a book on tape or on an audio file, and we can start regurgitating quotes from the book. Some people are visual learners. I have to be able to see it to ingrain it in my brain. And no matter what that learning style is, the experiential learning cycle touches every single one of those. So we always start with an experience. The students do something. Most often, that's going to be working on an activity dealing with a fictitious business. It's a fictitious business, but it's an extremely real scenario. All of these businesses that we use are taken from real life examples. Nothing is made up. Everything that we do and everything that we continue to develop within Real is based on the experiences that our own clients and other clients of other native CDFIs across the country are having. So it all begins with that experience. There's built-in reflection time. For the auditory learners, people who like to talk about it, to be able to absorb it, there are reflection questions built into every activity. You don't have to think about what to ask as a follow-up to get students talking about what you've just done. You can always add to those questions as the conversation develops, but you have a starting place. Next is expansion. We have tools embedded in the program to help students start to think about, how can I take what I just learned about a pet store and apply it to my catering business? Or how can I take what I just learned about a catering business and apply it to a t-shirt printing business, or a furniture shop that I'm going to run from my basement or my garage or something like that. And then ultimately is application. That application could be that I'm going to sit down and write this section of my business plan, or that I'm actually going to use what I just learned to calculate my break even or my pricing structure. Real is more than just about embedding the entrepreneurial mindset in people. It's all about the nuts and bolts of how to operate a successful business. So let's take a look at the curriculum. It includes activities that teach about personal financial management and business finances. We found over the years that people who do not manage their personal finances well tend to not manage their business finances well. And that's a recipe for disaster. So everything starts at home. We talk about personal budgeting. We talk about personal finances, getting your personal financial house in order so that you can qualify for a loan. And everything builds and builds and builds until they have all the tools they need to be able to run a financially successful business. Activities reinforce the connection between good personal financial management and achieving their career goals. It doesn't matter if someone takes the course and decides entrepreneurship is not for me. I think I want to start a business. I think I want to go to work for someone else rather than start a business. They're still going to be better managers of their own money, and they're going to understand how that business works. So they're going to be a better employee. They're going to help their boss make better decisions. And it addresses unique challenges faced by Native American business owners. As we have continued to build this program and evolve this program, we have done so with a keen eye to what's going on in Indian country. What are the unique challenges faced by our own business owners, whether it's dealing with the BIA, whether it is land ownership on trust land, whether it's dealing with suppliers, tax issues, and so forth. So we've built all of that in. We've been able to create a very, again, nuts and bolts approach that is very tangible in the results that people are going to get. The facilitators of this program, again, we don't call them instructors, we call them facilitators. One of the big questions that we get is, do I have to know about business? Do I have to be a business owner? Do I have to know about how to start a business? Absolutely not. Facilitators are going to develop and expand their knowledge and practice of experiential student-centered education. We are going to teach you how to teach the material. We're going to teach you how to get out of your students what you need to get out of them. That's the most important thing. We're also going to teach you how to draw on resources in your community so that you don't have to know everything. In fact, one of our mottos for years has been, I don't know, let's find out. Real facilitators do not have to have all the answers. And in fact, it's a pretty big step to let folks know, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to help you get the answers you need. We're going to help you develop sufficient mastery of entrepreneurship and small business development. You're going to learn a lot about how small businesses develop economies and how local economies grow on a backbone of entrepreneurial activity, and how you can not only help develop small businesses, but you can help develop the economy as a whole. You're going to develop as a useful resource to students. Our real facilitators are the go-to people. These are the folks who, when somebody has a problem, when they have a question, they're going to turn to you first. You are going to be a trusted source of information, a trusted guide through this process. And you're going to become an effective manager of the real program in your school, your organization, or your community. No matter what setting you're going to be offering real in, you're going to operate that as a living organism. It's going to be an operation in and of itself. You're going to have recruiting. You're going to be registering students. You're going to be managing those students and their success. And then you're going to be following up with those students later on. There are several different ways that we approach Real, and we do this with different products. We have what we call our flagship Real Entrepreneurship Program. This is a curriculum catalog of over 100 discrete activities. You can either build an entire course from this. We will help you build an entire course from this. You can use it to embed pieces of Real into what you're already doing. Or if you just need an hour and a half lunch and learn seminar on pricing, you can reach into that catalog and pull out an hour and a half pricing component, and you can offer that. If you need a 30-minute communication activity to do with a group, you can pull that out. So you don't have to actually build an entire course. Our course runs for about 8 weeks. So over 8 weeks, meeting once a week. That's what we've chosen. A lot of other organizations do a 10-week course. Community colleges will often run anywhere from a 12 to 14-week course, depending on the length of their semesters. And it's a very flexible program. We offer summer camp training. Now, summer camp, a lot of times, is a very quick and easy way to get Real started in a community. Kids are going to give you some slack, right? If you do some math wrong on a chalkboard or a whiteboard or an overhead and adults catch it, they're going to give you a lot of grief. The kids, maybe not so much. They're going to give you a little leeway to back up and do it again. And they're a lot of fun. We have found that the kids that we put through our summer camp training, we've done this now for 8 years. Our summer camps are the most fun I have all year long, because these kids are so creative, they're innovative, they and I hate the term think outside the box. They don't even know there's a box to think outside of. And they have so much fun learning how to create businesses, and they think of some of the coolest things ever. I didn't even know what an Instagram influencer was until these kids told me there was such a thing. And they're building little businesses based on writing code for video games. And it's just so cool to watch them do this. We also offer, by the way, let me just mention this, that summer camp training, you have to have the Real Entrepreneurship course training before you do the summer camp training, because the summer camp training really is about the management of the camp, recruiting for the camp, keeping kids alive, until mom and dad come to pick them up, making sure nobody chokes on a hot dog. Those are the, it sounds crazy, but those are the things we have to cover in the summer camp training. Things like insurance and covering, are you going to use a tribally owned building? Or are you going to use a private building? Those two things are going to present different challenges. Are you going to take the kids on field trips? We use tribal transportation to take the kids on a field trip every year. And we go visit different businesses. And then at the end of the day, we go ziplining. And so we have insurance challenges to deal with. And we have other tribal departments that we may be putting at risk, and we have to have those discussions. You're going to get all of that in the summer camp training. The school-based entrepreneurship or the school-based enterprise training is a great place to start, because then if you're not a teacher, you're going to have teachers support, you're going to have administration support, and the students really get into this. Whether it's starting a school store, or again, whether it's selling tickets for the spring musical or selling t-shirts for a basketball tournament. This is a way for kids to learn entrepreneurship in a very safe, non-threatening way. They're not really putting any of their money or their parents' money at risk, and they learn a lot along the way. We also have a rapid response module training. This is all about how to deploy education in a tactical way to help businesses with very immediate needs. So if you have a change in the local economy, let's say a new casino creates a different need for pricing. Maybe everybody has been pricing at a certain level. Now they've got to raise those prices to meet this new level of pricing that has been brought in by some of the shops in the casino or the hotel. And they've never done this before. Well, we want to make sure people do it right. And so you could roll out anywhere from 1.5 to 3 hour pricing seminar that you can help people with, either in small groups, or you can use these as one-on-one counseling tools. I think that's one of the most exciting things about the rapid response modules is they are designed to do both. You can bring people in for a lunch and learn or an evening seminar. You can do it through Zoom or Google Meet, or you can just do this one-on-one with folks. The worksheets are all there, and it really helps them get a quick hit of the information they need. I'm going to come back to Online Reel here in a little bit. Online Reel was something that we started a number of years ago, but the technology was not sufficient to do what we needed it to do. I've always joked that if you had a flip chart and some students, you could teach Reel in a barn. You don't need any kind of high-tech setup for Reel. And there's some beauty to that. There are a lot of beautiful things in being able to do that. And it didn't translate well into the digital world. We found a way to do that now, to reach people and to reach communities that are not easily accessible, and especially right now during the COVID pandemic. So when you're in a health crisis and people can't get together, we have come up with a way to make it feel like you're in a room with a lot of other people and you're learning together. In the early 2000s, we also got some grant money to come up with some programs that targeted certain areas. One is professional craft arts. And at Sequoia Fund, we work with a lot of artists. I'm going to tell you about a couple of the programs that we have for artists and how we use Reel with that. But a lot of these artists, they just love making art. They are not good at running the art business of their art. And the Professional Craft Arts program helps them with pricing, with marketing, with strategy, with distribution, and things that they need to know to run a successful business with their art. Agricultural entrepreneurship is one of our biggest hits right now, especially when we look at tribes that are getting into hemp, cannabis, other types of agriculture. Maybe they're getting into aquaponics, or things that are taking agriculture in a new direction. The agricultural entrepreneurship curriculum is designed to fit all along that food production and distribution chain. So if you have somebody who's going to start a farmer's market or a fruit stand, this will help them in the sourcing of their products. If you have someone who raises chickens or goats, then this also helps them as well. So it has a livestock component to it. You don't just have to be growing, potatoes and carrots and corn to make this fit. If you have a value added component, it fits that as well. In Cherokee, we're looking at building a cannery. Actually, we've got a cannery. We're looking at developing it into a true business so that people can bring their products in and can these on a mass scale. And we're also looking at a meat processing plant. And so for the people who are going to be running that, the agricultural entrepreneurship is a great intro to how to make that viable, how to use those services to process your own sauces, salsas, jerkies, meat products, whatever you've got, and how to use those services to create a viable business for yourself. The fact is, we are an aging population, and it's not going to reverse anytime soon. That trend is only going to grow, and home health care is going to be a major part of that, especially during COVID. We all saw what happened with some of the nursing homes in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, all those nursing homes that started really having a problem, and family members couldn't do much about it. And so once things calmed down a little bit, what we saw was a trend of people trying to move their family members out of those crowded facilities and put them in their homes where they could be a little safer, and home health care is a big part of that. That's not going to go away. And so what we do is we teach people how to do this on either an individual basis, or if you wanted to have a home health care agency where you're going to grow that business, maybe have 10, 15, 20 people working for you or more, we're going to show you how to scale that. And finally, we have a product that I'm extremely excited about, and that's Camp Girl Boss. We started this 3 years ago. The first year was a single day camp that we ran for 25 girls aged 10 to 13. And we did this in Asheville. It's not even in our service area, but we wanted to have a kind of a petri dish where we could try this out. And UNC Asheville, University of North Carolina at Asheville, lent us their campus and gave us plenty of space to be able to do this. and so we ran this camp for girls aged 10 to 13, and it was a huge hit. It was a week-long camp, and we got national press attention for this. Don't ask me how that happened. But we had newspapers and television stations all over the country asking about this, I guess because it just had a cool name. Our second year, we were going to run 10 camps all across Western North Carolina. And we did that for about 200 girls. We wanted to keep it manageable because in 10 camps all across our service area, we could keep our hands on all of those, and we could tell what's going on, and we could learn from that. And so it was a manageable scale up. This year would be our third year. 2020 was going to be the year we rolled out 100 camps across the country. And we were going to serve 2,000 girls aged 10 to 13, doing exactly the same thing that we had perfected in Western North Carolina. COVID had other ideas. So in a 30-day span, we changed our platform from live camps to a virtual learning management system platform with a mobile app that served 100,000 girls across the country. In the most rural of rural areas to downtown Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Atlanta, Georgia, you name it. If there was a girl who wanted to learn how to be an entrepreneur, be a leader, be a better communicator, increase her self-esteem and confidence, this program reached her, and the parents loved it. We were able to do this about the same time the schools were closing, and they were sending work home with the kids, and the parents said, my daughter spends all day doing homework and she hates it, but she gets through it because then she can crank up the Camp Girl Boss program and spend the rest of the evening working on her business, and she loves it. And that was music to our ears. We heard parents say things like, why don't our schools teach this way? This is a much better way. Our daughters are absorbing this information much better than they're absorbing what they're getting at school. And so we listened and we learned along the way, and I'm going to tell you where that's going here in just a moment. I want to back up just a moment now and talk about overall what is the Sequoia Fund, because when you hear about a small organization in Cherokee, North Carolina, and we have this global footprint with a program, you got to be thinking, how do we manage that? Well, Sequoia Fund was founded in about 1995, 96 as a revolving loan fund, community development fund of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. And it was just cobbled together with some tribal employees, some economic development folks. And in 1998, they realized that there was something to this, that Sequoia Fund could be more. And so it was incorporated and named Sequoia Fund in 1998, and we were incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which was smart. We didn't know how smart it was at the time, but that was a smart move, because in 2007 we became a native CDFI. We were one of the first CDFIs to carry the native CDFI designation. We're one of the oldest native CDFIs around. And as a native CDFI, you have to be a nonprofit. And so looking back, it was pretty smart for them to do it that way. North Carolina is divided up into 13 economic development regions. Our region, which you see in color here, is called Region A. And Cherokee straddles the county line between Swain County and Jackson County. But there is native land and native population throughout those 7 counties. And so it worked out really well that our service area, our target market, happens to overlap one of the economic development regions in North Carolina. And that provides some unique benefits. We can work with other organizations to expand our reach. We are all about small business lending and training. Everything we do is about small business development. We do training, small group training. Right now, we're doing a lot of training for tribal departments, for one of the local leadership institutes, for the Cherokee Boys Club, for the Cherokee Museum. Now is just a good time for people to hone their skills, and they've called on Sequoia Fund. We have become their go-to training source. Coaching, we work with a lot of our clients one-on-one. Trying to help them through hurdles. Our phones nowadays are forwarded to our personal cell phones. And I've got to give kudos to my staff. My staff doesn't care if they get a call at 9 o'clock at night. They're happy to take a call, and they will talk to clients. So if somebody feels like it's important enough to call us at 8:30 at night on a Friday night, they know somebody's going to answer the phone. And it may be just to say, hey, I can't talk right now. Can we set up something for Monday morning? But a lot of times it's just, I've got an issue. I just want to see what you think about this. And our staff is there to listen. And we do an amazing job coaching people through some of the most difficult periods in their business, all the way down to things that they just need a gut check on. They just need somebody else to give them the okay. And then we do consulting. Consulting is all about, we go into these client businesses, we identify problems, we help them create solutions to these problems, and then we watch them implement it, we monitor that. Each one of these are very different skill sets, and we do all of those things. We offer financial literacy programs. Again, we can't help somebody start a business if they can't get a business loan, if their personal credit is in such foul shape that they can't qualify, they don't have any savings built up or anything like that. So we run financial literacy programs, and we do this also with the local cooperative extension agency. We do this with the TANF program, and we do this with other organizations. Some of the health-related organizations will bring us in to do some financial literacy training for people in their programs, in the diabetes program and the healthy living programs and things like that. Because a lot of people think that eating healthy is expensive, and we help them understand that it is not. So really, financial literacy goes hand in hand with almost any other aspect of life. We do credit counseling. We have a certified credit counselor on staff who can help people fix those dings in their credit report, maybe get some of the old or inaccurate information removed from their credit report, and help them figure out ways and strategies to increase their credit scores to prepare them for a loan. And the types of loans that we have, we do startup loans, we do business expansion loans, we do emergency lending. And those emergency loans, we can turn those around really fast. You know, if you have an ice cream shop in downtown Cherokee, and it's early August, it's 98 degrees outside, and your air conditioning just went out. Well, you got to have some air conditioning, so we can make that happen in a very rapid way. We do housing rehab loans. Tribal members can qualify now for up to $25,000 at 4% interest over 5 years. And those housing rehab loans will pay for anything except furniture. If they need to redo their floors, their bathrooms, their kitchen, put a new deck on the front of the house, or anything like that. And that's been just an extremely popular loan program. And we find that a lot of people who go through the housing rehab loan program, it helps also to build their credit. Along the way, they're going to develop a relationship with Sequoia Fund, and at some point they may say, hey, I think I'd like to start a business. How can you help me do that? And the game is on, right? We can help them start a business. We have a credit builder program. The credit builder program is all about helping people who have either no credit, they are credit ghosts, right? They don't even exist as far as the credit bureaus are concerned, or they have really, really bad credit. And this credit builder program is designed on a template very similar to most other native CDFI credit builder programs. And it's a way to help build their credit in a safe environment, along with courses and monitoring and accountability to help them make sure they're managing their money in a responsible way. We have two things that are coming up. And again, all of this is about helping our tribal community. It is about reaching out to them and meeting the needs where they are. Ultimately, they may want to start a business, and that's icing on the cake. But we're going to start offering auto loans and, on the distant horizon, mobile home loans. You know, you can have a piece of land handed down to you by your grandmother, and then it takes you another 3 years to get it surveyed and another 2 years to get somebody who's willing to finance a mobile home. We can do that very, very quickly. We can make all of that happen for folks. I want to talk to you about some other programs that Sequoia Fund runs and how Real fits into all of these programs. I've already talked about Girl Boss. Real entrepreneurship is the underpinning of that. Everything that we use in Camp Girl Boss has a tie back to the Real program. We've modified some of these activities to make them fit better for girls, again, age 10 to 13. That's the sweet spot. Why girls age 10 to 13? Up until a certain point, academically, girls tend to outperform boys. When they reach middle school, maybe 5th, 6th grade, they start to fall behind. And there are a lot of different theories as to why that happens, but sometimes it's cultural. Maybe, you know, you have a twin brother, but you shouldn't try to make your twin brother look bad by getting good grades. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of different factors that cause girls to start to fall behind academically. And along with that is a drop in self-esteem and self-confidence. We found that when we can segregate girls, we can get them together working on things, even if they're doing it digitally. You know, they're in this virtual world, but even when they can get together virtually and work with other girls their age, they shine. They absolutely shine. Their self-esteem goes up. They enhance their communication skills, and they get so excited about starting businesses. Yes, there is a Camp Boy Boss on the horizon, but we've run camps for girls and boys together for years, and we see that dynamic, and we see how sometimes the boys are too busy trying to show out for the girls, and the girls are too busy trying to not look bad in front of the boys. And we just broke that dynamic in half, and we said, look, we're gonna take these girls in a direction that they never thought they could go, and it's been amazing to watch. We have something called the GDUA Savings Program. This is an IDA, or Individual Development Account program, for our language immersion school. The GDUA Academy is a K-5 school here in Cherokee that every course, every topic is 100% in Cherokee language. When you walk through the front door, there's a sign above the door that says Cherokee from here on out. So it's a great program. It's a great little school with a wonderful staff, and they have been so good to participate. The parents love this program, and we've piloted this for several years now, hoping to grow it to Cherokee Central schools as well. But the GDUA Savings Program, we show up every month. We show up with a banker who takes their money, puts it into a bank account, and then at the end of the school year, we can match that. And then we throw a pretty cool ice cream party, and the kids love that. Along the way, they get a little snippet of entrepreneurial education along the way. We kind of drip feed it, so they're not aware they're being taught something when they bring us their $5 bill or their $10 bill to deposit, but they're getting it. The Authentically Cherokee program was the program that we designed for artists because we needed to find a way to enable them to focus on their art. We had artists who would come to us and say, I need to build a website. I need to do this or do that. I need to learn how to do my own accounting. Well, In real, we teach you that you don't have to become an accountant to be good at accounting. You just need to learn how accounting is done so that you can hire an accountant and you can have a conversation with an accountant, because accountants do speak a different language, and we want you to be able to speak that language. And so the Authentically Cherokee program is a website that we built. Now artists can concentrate on focus, they can focus on their art. They can make what they do best. They bring it to us. We catalog it, we photograph it, we post it on the website, we warehouse it, and we pack it, we ship it, and we collect the money. We keep the cost of the shipping because we pay that out of our own pocket, and then we keep a 5% fee of the sale price, just a little 5% commission. We give everything else back to the artists. Now, for that 5%, they don't have to come up with a way to advertise. They don't have to worry about social media. They don't have to worry about a website. They don't have to worry about packing and shipping. We handle all of that for them. If they want to learn how to do that and they get to a place where they can manage it, great. We're going to help them do that. But along the way, we're there to support them 100%. The Kananishki art market is an art market that grew up about 4 years ago. This is going to be our 5th year. We had to skip a year because of funding. Kananishki means spider in Cherokee. That's the Cherokee word for spider, and the spider is the symbol of creativity for the intricate webs that she weaves. And in Cherokee lore, if you want your children to be creative, you wash their hands in the dew of the spider web. You run their hands through the spider web, and that gives them creative abilities. And I think that's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful logo, and it's a beautiful art market. We know we're never going to be as big as Santa Fe, and that's okay. But in creating this art market, we've given artists an avenue to talk about their story, to talk about their art to people who are interested in their art. And this year, it's all virtual. Kananishki.com. December 4th through 6th is going to be televised, and it's going to be live streamed through social media, through our website, and through a local cable channel here in Cherokee. It's going to be a lot like a home shopping network event. It's very different for us. It's very different for the artists. But I think it's going to be an enjoyable event. We figured, why skip a year when we can try something new? And Cherokee Tribal Communications has been a big part of helping us out with that. We also started a program called Peer. I didn't talk about this in our loans, but this is a program that we developed as we saw that revolving door of recidivism, people going back into the system because they would come out of jail, they're unemployable, they didn't know what to do, and they needed a way to generate an income, but nobody would hire them. And now we teach them entrepreneurship, and we take a bet on those folks. They complete the program. We're going to lend them $5,000. It doesn't matter what their background is, doesn't matter what their conviction was for, it doesn't matter how many times they've been in the system, it doesn't matter what their record is, and all it matters is that they have a plan, and they see a path to turning $5,000 into a business. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're starting a landscaping business or a service business, that can be a great starting point. Also, maybe I can't start a business for $5,000 and you can't either, but we can put our heads together and figure out a way to partner, and now we've got $10,000. So this is a program that we think is really going to change lives, and recidivism reduction is a big hot topic right now. And so we want to make sure that we're doing all we can to improve the economic lives and conditions of Cherokee people. Now, all this there's so much stuff here. What is our role with Real Entrepreneurship? How can we do this? We have 5 staff members and we have 9 board members. So this is a lot to take on, but we have an army of consultants and coaches and trainers that we have used for years. They've worked very closely with us. They know what we do, and we know their skills and what they can do. And so our role is to develop the curriculum. If you come to us and say, we need something developed for this particular application, we don't know how to do it, we can figure out how to do that, whether it's fishing. Of course, now, again, agricultural entrepreneurship will cover that, but if you needed something a little more specific, we can work to create that for you. We developed the website and an online community. We have online communities on LinkedIn, on Facebook. We have 2 communities. We have an open community for Real Entrepreneurship on Facebook, and we have a closed community for Real Entrepreneurship facilitators so that they can go in and learn from each other and take ideas from each other and pass their own knowledge around. We offer certification events. Now, we offer those certification events here in North Carolina where you can come to us, or we offer certification events where if you have 6 or more people in your community who would like to be trained, we can come to you. And we can do that live. We can do that in a very social distancing, very responsible way that meets all of your tribe's COVID-19 guidelines, however we need to do that. But things are changing, and this is what I'm really excited about. We scrapped online Reel a few years ago because it didn't work as well as we needed it to. The technology wasn't there that allowed us to do this in an experiential way. It became very one-directional. The person who was teaching the class was less of a facilitator, and they were just throwing knowledge at people through their computer screen. And that just did not work for what Reel is. And so we're bringing that back. I'm going to talk about that very last thing. And it's going to be so exciting. You're not going to have to come to us to get trained. And we're not even going to have to go to you to get trained. We develop new markets, just like the healthcare, the agriculture, the professional craft arts. We are always looking at new markets. Right now, we're working on an innovation technology market. We're also working on a mechatronics and robotics entrepreneurship, and a couple of other things that are kind of exciting. We sell materials. So if you need a workbook as a companion to your course, we have those available. We also have those available as a downloadable PDF and some other things as well. We do evidence development. Now, this is nice when our grant funders say, how are things going? Prove to us that you need money. Prove to us that this is a viable program. But evidence development really goes back to market research. It is our way of finding out what you need in your tribe, in your community, maybe for your local businesses, and how can we adapt what we have to meet those needs. You can learn more about it at realentrepreneurship.org. I invite you to come over to the website. I invite you to look us up on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. We're not as active on Twitter, really active on Facebook. And so come and learn more about what we do there. Now, I've mentioned this a couple of times, and I know it's kind of a teaser. I've said that I was not really happy with the online Reel, and we're changing that. And here's what's coming. Real entrepreneurship will not go away, but it's going to have a baby brother or a baby sister called Tactics. We're working on new ways to certify facilitators in this new COVID world. We are trying to work on new ways to distribute materials to students who might not be able to get out of their homes, and they may not have great internet access. We're working on community and networking opportunities for facilitators, and that is all going to happen through the Tactics app. That app will be online the first part of 2021, and Tactics is all about having a way for people to take the course and facilitate the course either through a computer or through a mobile device. We are packaging materials for different markets, different applications, and that's all going to go through the Tactics community. The reason we chose Tactics, other than it's kind of a catchy name that you can easily misspell, right, with the X, we can take our courses and we can create startup tactics, launch tactics, growth tactics, financial tactics, scale tactics, marketing tactics, and on and on and on, agricultural tactics, you name it. And we're creating this as a way for people to create and join communities around their interests and around their needs while learning a lot. Now, we have just a few minutes left, but I wanted to walk you through a sample activity. And I'm going to break this down for you. People always want to know, well, how long does this course take? How many hours is this course? As I mentioned before, it can be as long or as short as you need it to be. Let's say you need a break-even activity. Break-even is very simply that concept of helping a business find the point at which they stop bleeding and start making money. Where are all of their costs covered? And at what point do they start making a profit? They need to know that break-even point. That break-even point becomes the high jump bar. And if you think about it as a track and field event, if you don't know how high the bar is, you don't know how high you have to jump to get over it. And businesses are the same way. We want them to have a clear picture of where their break-even point is so that they know how high they have to jump every day, every week, and every month. So I'm going to show you an activity called Tawny's T-shirts. Tawny is a typical lady. She's a young lady who wants to start a business. Every activity starts with a purpose. This purpose helps you know you've got the right materials. So if you need to help somebody learn how to perform a break-even analysis, understand the difference between their fixed and variable costs and how that affects their break-even point, to perform an actual break-even analysis on a proposed business idea, and to use technology to help identify the break-even point. We also, I'm not going to show you the spreadsheet, but we have a spreadsheet designed for this that you can give your students. We always make them push the pencil first. Yes, we're into torture. We want them to do the math. But that's valuable because after they've done the math and they've pushed that pencil and they've created that calculation themselves, then you can be the hero. You can give them the spreadsheet and show them just how easy it is by feeding in their numbers. It tells you, every activity tells you what materials you need to be able to do this. Most of these are going to be very simple, low-tech materials. You can use a computer or an overhead projector for this. You don't have to have that because we're going to give you an answer key or an answer sheet that you can give to your students. And every activity will tell you exactly how long it will take to do this. Now, it says 60 to 90 minutes. A lot of that depends on how quickly your students do these calculations, how quickly they pick up on the concept, and how much time you want to spend in the debrief or in the reflection questions. I always go with the higher end number. I've never made anybody angry by stopping short. But if you run long, if you tell people it's going to take 60 minutes and then it takes 90, you can get in a little hot water. So I always go with a higher number, and I've always found it to be fairly accurate. The experience. Remember, I said every real activity starts with an experience. And so this breaks down the experience step by step. You don't have to be an accountant to know how to break even. All you have to do is guide people through this path, through this experience. You're going to divide them into small groups. If you're doing this through Zoom, you can do this through your Zoom rooms or Zoom breakout rooms. You can do this if you're using Google Meet. By the way, before the end of the year, Google Meet is going to have breakout rooms just like Zoom. So there's a little tidbit for you. So look forward to that. I think other Zoom competitors are catching on, but there are ways to break people up into groups. If you have a small group, you just do it as a whole group. I've had 6 people, and I'm like, I'm not going to break these people up. I'm just going to do it as a group of 6, and that's okay too. You're going to distribute the handout, and you're going to overview the definitions and the terms. Every real facilitator gets a comprehensive glossary of terms and definitions. You're going to have everything at your fingertips. So if somebody says, what is a variable cost? You can look that up for them. You can tell them, or they can go look it up themselves, but that information is there. You're never going to be left guessing what is something. What am I trying to communicate with folks here? You're going to give them a few minutes to label their expenses in Part A as overhead or cost of goods sold. And then it shows you here how you're going to get them to write certain things down. You're going to get them to list it out on chart paper or the board, and it gives you a starting point for some discussion. And then you're going to go to Part B. Again, if you can follow the recipe, you can cook this dish. You're going to go Part A, Part B, Part C. It even gives you the setting. Her mom's going to help her finance this, and there's a local building that has some room that she's going to be able to rent, and be able to set up her business there. That also brings up some questions. Does she really need to be in a building? Can she do this from a spare bedroom from her home? Does she have a basement? Is there an outbuilding? Is there some other place she could do this? Again, all of these questions are things that you can talk about with your students. Once they've completed this section, they go to the next section. Some facilitators will say, okay, now everybody stop when you finished A. All right, now we're going to do B together. Everybody stop when you finish B. Here's my little secret sauce. I don't. You might have one group that flies through this. You might have a group that just eats it up, they get it, and they finish long before another group finishes. That's okay. What I do is I have the group that just finished join the other group and help them. Now, I'm not the one who's teaching. The students are doing the teaching. And that is a learning style that I didn't mention. Remember, I said something about tactile, visual, auditory. Some people learn best when they can teach other people. It binds that knowledge to the old brain and makes it real. So let your students run ahead of other students. When they've finished, don't let them sit around. Put them in another group and let them help those students, and things will speed up from there. Again, you have your calculations here. You don't even need to know how to calculate break even. We give your students, we give you the calculations, and then some questions, some what if questions, some different scenarios. What would her monthly sales be required to break even in dollars? You can do this in dollars. You can do this in number of t-shirts. How many does she have to sell a week? That's important. Sometimes when we see a big number, it's scary, and your students might get a little frightened by seeing a big number, but when you break it down to the day and the hour, it becomes very real. How many cups of coffee do I need to sell in this coffee shop to break even? They're going to have one of two reactions. They're going to say, oh yeah, I can do that. Or, ooh, I've got to fix something. I can't do that. And then you finally get your answer key. I always hand these out to students at the end. Let them check their work, make sure that their numbers match our numbers, and it helps reinforce that learning as well, because if they got something wrong, then they can work with others in their group to go back and change it and figure out how to get it right. Woo! We have covered a lot of information in the time that we've had together. And I think the most important piece of information that I want to cover with you is how to get in touch with me, how to get in touch with Sequoia Fund. If you determine that you need a way to teach entrepreneurship and you've not found anything that you're happy with, I want to give you a taste of real. We can do this live and in person, or we can do this virtually. One of the things that I offer other CDFIs, community development organizations, and even your tribe, it's going to cost you something to get people certified to teach this material. For the cost of a plane ticket and a hotel room, I will come and introduce Real to your community. I will take you through this in a day-long class. You'll get to be students. You'll get to see this from the student's perspective, and you'll get to see what your students are going to get out of this. When I get back home and the bills are all paid, if you decide that you want to do this and you have 5 or 6 people who you'd like to certify in Real, well, we're going to take what you spent to get me out there on the plane and the hotel. We're going to take that off of your final bill. So that trip essentially is going to cost you nothing when you decide to pay for people to become Real certified. We want to certify as many people as we can. This is not about us making money. This is about perpetuating this program and keeping people in communities who can teach Real, because we want to grow a crop of entrepreneurs where you are. I don't know your entrepreneurs. I don't know your community. I don't want to come into your community and teach entrepreneurship. I want to teach you, and I want to teach others in your community how to teach entrepreneurship so that you have that base of knowledge where you are. I am a firm believer that entrepreneurship is not in the DNA. A lot of people think you're just either a born entrepreneur or you're not. No, we all have that little bit in us that can learn it. And entrepreneurship is a teachable set of skills. We have taken people who have spent a lifetime working for someone else who never thought they could own their own business, and they have a little spark of a great idea, and we can teach them how to run a successful business based on that spark. So the encouragement, I think, is that you can do this if you're willing to learn the skills to make it happen. And we'd be overjoyed to be able to teach you those skills. I appreciate getting to talk with you today. I know that it's kind of like drinking through a fire hose. I've thrown a lot of things at you in an hour, but I'd love to follow up this conversation with a real conversation about Real. So get in touch with me and we'll figure out how to make that happen. And thank you so much. And again, thank you to the National Center and the Native Edge program for allowing me to come and talk to you today.
Hello, my name is Chad Marchand, and I'm the Vice President of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development and Interim Executive Director of Native Edge Finance. I personally want to thank all of our presenters today. Both John Chirac and Russ Siegel presented some great information that hopefully all of you benefited from. Also, I want to remind folks that if you wish to reach out to any of our speakers either today or tomorrow, please feel free to reach out to our NEI coordinator, Ali Rumbach, and she can put you in direct contact with any of them. Additionally, as our President and CEO stated in his welcome, we want to thank our primary sponsor of this event, the Wells Fargo Foundation. Without their continued support of NCIAD, we would not be able to bring these types of events to you on a monthly basis. So thank you once again. Also, I wanted to thank Ali Rumbach for organizing this two-day event. As I mentioned earlier, Ali is our NEI coordinator. Also, thank you to NCIAD Board Chairman Derek Watchman and our President and CEO Chris James for assisting us as well. And lastly, I want to thank Skybear Media for assisting us in the filming and editing of this particular NEI. Your support is truly appreciated. Thank you.